One of the most powerful figures in modern technology is spending billions to stop humans from wearing out, not to upload minds, not to build robots, but to slow down aging itself. While the world watches AI evolve at breakneck speed, Sam Altman is quietly funding a far more radical idea: that the human body might be failing not because it must, but because no one ever tried to fix it properly. Humanity has never been more advanced. We carry supercomputers in our pockets. We automate intelligence. We simulate reality. And yet, our bodies still follow the same ancient script. They weaken, they break down, they slowly fall apart, one cell at a time. This is the paradox hiding in plain sight. We live in a world of exponential progress, but our biology remains stubbornly linear. No updates, no patches, just slow, predictable decay. Not dramatic enough to feel urgent, not sudden enough to feel avoidable. Just inevitable, or so we are told. That belief is exactly what this story challenges. Sam Altman is not investing billions to make humans superhuman. He is investing to prevent them from deteriorating so early. That distinction matters more than it sounds, because it reframes aging from destiny to dysfunction. This is not a story about immortality. It is not about cheating death or escaping the human condition. It is about something much less poetic and therefore much more dangerous. Maintenance. Most people do not die because something spectacular happens. They die because their systems fail one by one. The heart weakens, the brain misfires, the immune system forgets how to do its job. Cancer does not arrive as an invasion. It appears as a consequence of accumulated errors. We call this aging, as if naming it makes it acceptable. But aging is not a single thing. It is not a switch that flips at some mystical birthday. It is a slow cascade of biological compromises happening quietly, constantly, inside every living body. Seen this way, aging stops looking like fate. It starts looking like engineering. And engineers have a terrible habit. When they see a system breaking down, they try to fix it, even when they are told not to. Even when they are warned it is dangerous, especially then. This is where the story becomes uncomfortable. Because when someone with nearly unlimited resources looks at aging and does not see tragedy, but inefficiency, the conversation changes entirely. Aging becomes a problem to analyze, not a law to obey. Cells accumulate damage. Repair mechanisms slow down. Garbage builds up inside tissues. Nothing mystical, nothing supernatural. Just biology doing what it does when maintenance falls behind. And once you frame it this way, a quiet thought slips in, almost uninvited. If aging is damage and damage follows rules, then aging might not be inevitable. It might simply be unmanaged. This is the thought sitting at the core of Sam Altman's quiet bet, not shouted from stages, not packaged for social media, funded patiently, methodically, almost anonymously. While the world argues about whether machines will replace us, he is backing a different question. What if we are being replaced not by technology, but by our own deterioration? The idea is unsettling because it removes comfort. If aging is destiny, we can accept it. If aging is a technical problem, then ignoring it becomes a choice, and choices carry responsibility. This is why this story feels heavier than most futurist fantasies. There are no glowing cities here, no eternal avatars, just microscopes, lab benches, and researchers asking questions previous generations preferred not to touch. Questions like why cells forget how to repair themselves, why the body tolerates its own decline, why time wins so easily. There is a reason this work happens quietly. Big promises attract shortcuts, and shortcuts in biology kill people. So instead of promises, there is patience. Instead of hype, there is silence. And instead of bold claims, there is a modest ambition. Not to defeat aging, not to erase death, but to slow the damage enough to matter. To turn aging from an unstoppable force into something negotiable. And that is where the vertigo begins. Because if billions are being spent without noise, without spectacle, without a product to sell, it means someone believes the rules are softer than we think. That biology is not a wall, but a system with weak points. It means someone believes aging is not inevitable. And if that belief is even partially correct, everything that follows changes. Not tomorrow, not overnight, but quietly, relentlessly, just like aging itself. The myth collapses the moment you look closely. Aging is not a cosmic timer ticking towards zero. There is no internal countdown hidden in your DNA. No invisible hand deciding that at a certain age things must fall apart. Biology does not work with deadlines. It works with processes. And aging is one of them. What we call aging is not a single event. It is not even a single mechanism. It is the accumulation of millions of tiny failures happening quietly, constantly, inside the body. Most of them invisible, most of them tolerated, until one day they are not. Start with cellular repair. Every cell in your body is damaged every day. By oxygen, by radiation, by normal metabolism, by simply existing. When you are young, repair systems fix most of that damage quickly. Errors are corrected, proteins are replaced, DNA mistakes are patched before they matter. Over time, those repair systems slow down, not dramatically, just enough to miss things. A broken molecule here, a miscopied instruction there. Nothing fatal, nothing urgent, just small imperfections left behind. Then there are proteins. Proteins are the workers of biology. They fold into precise shapes to do precise jobs. But folding is fragile. Heat, stress, oxidation, time all interfere. When proteins misfold, they stop working properly and start clogging the system. They bump into other proteins. They stick where they should not. They interfere with signaling, structure, movement. This is not theoretical. This is how neurodegenerative diseases begin. Long before symptoms appear, misfolded proteins quietly accumulate. Then comes the cleanup problem. Cells are supposed to take out their trash. Broken components, damaged organelles, useless debris. This internal cleaning process keeps tissues functional. But like any waste management system, it depends on energy, coordination, and timing. With age, that cleanup slows. Not because the body wants to decay, but because energy production drops, signaling becomes noisy, and feedback loops lose precision. Garbage piles up inside cells. Tissues become less responsive. Inflammation increases. The system grows louder, slower, angrier. None of this kills you on its own. What it does is reduce margin. Less margin for stress, less margin for infection, less margin for recovery. The body keeps running, but it is running closer to the edge. Seen together, aging looks less like destiny and more like deferred maintenance. A complex machine that still functions, but with parts slightly out of alignment, systems compensating for failures, and no scheduled shutdown to fix everything at once. And this is the exact point where the story becomes uncomfortable. Because once aging looks like damage, a question becomes unavoidable. Why does the body allow this damage to accumulate in the first place? Why are repair systems not maintained indefinitely? Why does cleanup slow down at all? Evolution provides part of the answer. It optimizes for reproduction, not longevity. As long as a system works well enough early on, there is little pressure to keep it perfect later. Biology is efficient, not sentimental. But understanding that does not make the consequences easier to accept. Because if aging is the result of systems gradually losing efficiency, then aging is not sacred. It is not metaphysical. It is not untouchable. It is a side effect of how biology prioritizes resources. And that is where Retro Biosciences enters quietly, without grand declarations. Retro does not treat aging as an enemy to defeat. It treats it as a process to intervene in earlier. Not at the end, when collapse is inevitable, but upstream, where small changes still matter. They are not trying to stop death, they are trying to delay damage. They are not asking how long a human can live. They are asking how long a human can function well before decline takes over. That shift is subtle, but profound. If you slow the accumulation of damage, you change everything downstream. Diseases arrive later. Recovery becomes easier. The slope of decline becomes less steep. Life does not stretch infinitely, but it stretches meaningfully. And this is why the idea is so unsettling. Because once you accept that aging follows rules, you are forced to accept the next step. Rules can be studied. Rules can be influenced. Rules can sometimes be bent. Once aging looks like damage, one uncomfortable idea follows. Damage can be slowed. And if damage can be slowed, the entire story of human life quietly begins to change. This is the moment biology stopped pretending aging was irreversible. For decades, the rules seemed absolute. Cells were born young, they specialized, they aged, and they died. A one-way journey. Once a cell chose its identity, skin, liver, neuron, there was no going back. Time only moved forward. Then, a discovery quietly rewrote the rules. Researchers found that adult cells could be pushed backward into a younger biological state. Not cosmetically young, not metaphorically refreshed. Biologically younger at the level of gene expression and cellular behavior. It was as if time, at least inside a cell, was negotiable. This was not science fiction. It was reproducible, repeatable, real. Aging, it turned out, was not simply wear and tear. It was also a program. And programs can be altered. The shock was immediate. If cells could be rejuvenated, then aging was not a one-way street. The clock was not just slowing down. In the right conditions, it could partially rewind. But biology never offers gifts without consequences. To make a cell younger, scientists had to interfere with the very mechanisms that define its identity. Push too far, and the cell forgets what it is supposed to be. A muscle cell no longer behaves like muscle. A neuron stops acting like a neuron. Order collapses. Cells return to a primitive, unstable state where the only instruction left is growth. This is not healing. This is chaos. And chaos in biology has a name. Cancer. Cancer is what happens when cells lose their identity and their limits at the same time. They stop cooperating. They stop listening. They multiply without regard for the organism they belong to. Full reprogramming, done carelessly, creates exactly that condition. This is why the discovery was both exhilarating and terrifying. It proved rejuvenation was possible. and it proved that doing it wrong was catastrophic. Most longevity projects fail right here. Some chase full reset, dreaming of total cellular youth, and crash straight into tumor risk. Others pull back so far that nothing meaningful changes. The result is either danger or disappointment. There is almost no safe middle ground. And that narrow, uncomfortable middle is exactly where Retro Biosciences decided to operate. Retro's approach is not transformation, it is restraint. They are not trying to erase cellular identity, they are trying to preserve it. Same cell, same role, same function, just with less accumulated damage and more youthful behavior. Think of it as a software update rather than a factory reset. A factory reset wipes everything. Identity, memory, structure. It works, but at a terrible cost. A software update fixes bugs, patches vulnerabilities, and improves performance without erasing what already works. That is the ideal. In practice, it is brutally difficult. Cells are not computers. They do not like being told what to do. They respond unpredictably. They compensate. They overreact. Timing matters. Dosage matters. Context matters. Push the wrong signal at the wrong moment, and the system spirals. This is why rejuvenation is one of the most dangerous frontiers in modern biology. You are not fighting ignorance, you are fighting precision. Every intervention sits on a knife edge. Too weak and nothing happens. Too strong and control is lost. There is no generous margin for error. Biology does not forgive ambition. Retro treats this problem like diffusing an explosive device rather than launching a product. Slow experiments, narrow targets, relentless safety constraints, progress measured in millimeters, not headlines. Because the goal is not to prove rejuvenation is possible. That question is already answered. The real question is whether rejuvenation can be done safely, repeatedly, and without destroying the very systems it aims to protect. And that question changes everything. Rejuvenation is possible, but doing it safely may be one of the most dangerous challenges biology has ever faced. This is the moment when most fantasies collapse. Because Retro Biosciences does not look like the future people imagine. There are no theatrical breakthroughs, no cinematic rituals, no spectacle designed to impress. What Retro is building would bore most dinner parties to death. And that is precisely the point. Retro is not a futurist circus. It is not a transhumanist manifesto in lab form. It is an attempt to intervene in aging with the same discipline medicine uses when lives are actually on the line. Slowly, precisely, relentlessly. The company deliberately limits itself to 3 axes. Not because there are no other ideas in longevity science, but because complexity is the enemy of safety. Biology is already chaotic enough without adding ambition on top of it. The first axis is partial cellular reprogramming, but stripped of everything reckless. You already know the danger. Push cells too far, and they forget who they are. Identity collapses. Cancer appears. Retro's approach is the opposite of dramatic. They aim to rewind only specific markers of aging, just enough to restore youthful function, while keeping cellular identity locked in place. Same cell type, same role, same instructions, just fewer errors accumulated along the way. This is not rejuvenation as transformation, it is rejuvenation as correction. Fix what drifted, leave everything else untouched. That restraint is not aesthetic, it is survival. The second axis is restoring cellular cleaning systems. Inside every cell, there is a constant battle against waste. Proteins break, organelles malfunction, molecular debris accumulates. When you are young, internal cleanup systems work efficiently. They recycle what can be reused and remove what cannot. With age, this cleaning slows. Not because it stops working, but because it loses priority. Energy production drops, signaling becomes noisy. The cell starts tolerating clutter. That clutter interferes with everything. Signals misfire, repairs fail, inflammation rises. Cells become stressed not because something dramatic happened, but because their internal environment became polluted. Retro aims to restore those cleanup mechanisms, not to make cells superhuman, but to give them back the environment they evolved to function in. Cleaner cells behave younger without changing what they are. Again, this sounds boring. It is also foundational. The third axis is systemic disease delay. This is where the real impact hides. Retro does not frame success as living to 150. That number excites investors and terrifies regulators. Instead, they focus on pushing age-related diseases further into the future. Alzheimer's later, cancer later, cardiovascular failure later. Not erased, delayed. This distinction changes everything. Most human suffering is not caused by death itself. It is caused by the decades leading up to it. Cognitive decline, loss of independence, chronic disease. Bodies that remain alive while life quietly shrinks around them. If you delay disease, you compress morbidity. Life does not stretch endlessly. It stays functional longer. The years that matter are protected. From a societal perspective, this matters more than radical longevity ever could. Healthcare costs shift. Caregiving burdens change. Productivity extends. Human dignity lasts longer. And none of this requires immortality. This is why Retro avoids entire categories of longevity spectacle. No cryogenics. Freezing bodies does not repair damage. No exotic transfusions. Borrowing youth does not solve systemic decay. No TikTok biohacks. Stressing the body is not the same as repairing it. Retro is not interested in shocking biology into submission. They are interested in restoring balance where it has slowly drifted. That approach is not exciting. It does not lend itself to viral clips. It does not make people feel like they are watching the future arrive. It feels incremental. And that is exactly why it is dangerous. Because incremental science is what actually reshapes humanity. Antibiotics did not arrive with thunder. Neither did vaccines. Neither did sanitation, anesthesia, or antibiotics. They arrived quietly, cautiously, and changed everything. Retro is betting on the same pattern. That progress in biology is not loud. It is subtle. It does not announce itself. It simply shows up one day as fewer diagnoses, later decline, and longer stretches of life that still feel alive. Subtle science looks boring, until you realize boring is usually what works. So, as we've seen, this is where ambition usually breaks. Aging is embedded everywhere. Touch one parameter, and the system reacts. Increase cellular repair, and cancer risk rises. Suppress inflammation, and immune defense weakens. Boost regeneration, and tissue identity destabilizes. Biology never gives you a free move. This is why longevity research advances so slowly, and why so many promising ideas collapse under scrutiny. Most experiments require timescales that modern science is terrible at handling. 5 years is nothing. 10 years is still early. Many effects only reveal themselves after decades. By the time you know whether something truly worked, the world has moved on. Worse, side effects are patient. They hide. Early results often look clean. Biomarkers improve, cells appear younger, function temporarily increases. Then, years later, the consequences surface. Tumors appear, systems fail under stress. What looked like rejuvenation turns out to be fragility disguised as progress. This has happened repeatedly. Extend lifespan in simple organisms, only to find the same intervention destabilizes mammals. Improve one tissue, but accelerate decline in another. Silence a pathway linked to aging, then discover it was quietly protecting against metabolic collapse or immune failure. The body is not optimized for elegance. It is optimized for survival under chaos. Intervene too forcefully, and you shatter equilibrium. Feedback loops break. Compensatory mechanisms overreact. The system loses its internal checks and balances. Intervene too gently, and nothing changes. The body absorbs the intervention like background noise and continues aging along its original trajectory. This is the knife edge where almost everyone fails. Aging is not fragile. It is resilient. It has been shaped by billions of years of evolutionary pressure. It is reinforced by redundancy, overlap, and fail-safes designed to keep organisms alive long enough to reproduce. Aging persists not because biology is careless, but because it is efficient. Short-term survival beats long-term perfection every time. That resilience makes aging incredibly difficult to influence. Every pathway involved in aging is also involved in something essential: growth, repair, immunity, metabolism, stress response. Pull too hard on any one thread, and the entire fabric shifts. This is why longevity research is littered with false dawns. Breakthroughs that looked revolutionary in early trials quietly disappear. Papers are published. Headlines are written. Then the idea fades, not because it was wrong, but because it was incomplete. Understanding mechanisms is not enough. Intervening safely in a living system is a different skill entirely. It requires restraint. It requires patience. It requires accepting that progress may be measured in small delays rather than dramatic reversals. And that is deeply unsatisfying for a world addicted to big promises. This is the brutal reality Retro and others face. Not ignorance, but complexity. Not lack of ideas, but lack of safe leverage points. Every move risks unintended consequences that may only appear years later. Knowing how deeply aging is woven into biology, one question becomes impossible to ignore. If the problem is this hard, if the timelines are this long, if the risks are this high, why keep going at all? This is where the story becomes psychological, because this bet does not come from fear of death. It comes from frustration with waste. When Sam Altman talks about aging in interviews, he does not sound mystical or anxious. He sounds irritated, almost impatient. He has said repeatedly, in different forms, that aging looks less like a law of nature and more like a problem biology never bothered to solve properly. At one point, he described aging as something close to a disease, not in a poetic sense, in a technical one. A process that causes predictable failure, suffering, and death, and therefore something medicine should try to address rather than accept. That framing matters. Altman's public thinking has always revolved around leverage. How small interventions, placed at the right level, can reshape entire systems. That is how he talks about startups. That is how he talks about AI. And that is how he seems to think about biology. Aging, in his view, is not tragic. It is inefficient. He has openly said that extending human health span would be one of the highest leverage things society could do, higher than many technologies that dominate headlines, because aging quietly limits everything else: productivity, creativity, learning, long-term decision-making. From that angle, aging is not a personal problem. It is a civilizational bottleneck. Every generation accumulates experience, deep expertise, pattern recognition that only emerges after decades. Then biology pulls the plug, minds fade, bodies fail, institutions lose memory, humanity resets again and again. Altman has pointed out that we spend enormous resources training people, doctors, engineers, researchers, leaders. We invest decades to reach peak competence and then allow biology to erase that investment just as it becomes most valuable. From a systems perspective, that is absurd. Slowing aging is not about living forever. It is about preserving continuity, about letting knowledge compound instead of constantly resetting, about reducing the massive human waste embedded in decline. This is why Retro fits his worldview so cleanly. Not flashy, not ideological, just a cold attempt to reduce unnecessary loss. He is not chasing radical immortality timelines. He is funding work that, if successful, would quietly push decline later. A few years at first, maybe more over time. That is enough to matter. Altman has also said that progress often looks boring while it is happening, that real breakthroughs rarely arrive with drama. They arrive as infrastructure, as systems that fade into the background while everything else accelerates on top of them. Longevity in this frame is infrastructure for humanity. If people stay healthy longer, everything else benefits. Innovation improves. Institutions stabilize. Long-term thinking becomes possible again. The future stops being something each generation barely glimpses before disappearing. This is not a rebellion against death. It is resistance to erasure. And that is the psychological core of the bet. Not fear, not ego, but a refusal to accept that the most experienced, capable, and insightful humans should routinely be removed from the system by default. Seen this way, the logic becomes unsettlingly clean. If aging slows down, it does not just change individual lives, it changes how civilization evolves. Aging was never a clock. It was damage accumulating quietly inside cells, repair slowing down, cleanup failing, identity drifting. Cells can, in fact, be made biologically younger. Time can loosen its grip, but the price is clear. Push too far and cells forget who they are. That is why almost everyone fails here. Aging is not fragile, it is resilient. This is exactly where Retro Biosciences positions itself, backed by Sam Altman. Not with fantasies, not with immortality theatre, but with slow surgical attempts to delay damage, restore cellular cleanup, and push disease later rather than chase eternity. Behind that approach sits a simple but unsettling idea. Aging behaves like a civilizational bottleneck. It erases experience. It resets knowledge. It breaks continuity just when wisdom becomes most valuable. Seen from far enough away, this is not a medical problem. It is a systems problem. From a cold perspective, that is waste. Slowing aging is not a rebellion against death. It is an attempt to reduce unnecessary loss, to preserve continuity, to let experience accumulate instead of constantly resetting the board. From here, the future splits. In one version, health lasts longer, minds stay sharp, bodies remain capable, experience compounds instead of evaporating. Life does not stretch infinitely, but it stays fully alive for longer. In the other, time becomes a luxury. Health arrives unevenly. Longevity concentrates. The future accelerates for some before it reaches others. Science does not choose between these futures. Societies do. This pattern is familiar. Every major breakthrough followed it. Uneven access first, fear second, moral panic everywhere, then normalization. What was once elite becomes infrastructure. What was once controversial becomes invisible. Electricity did it. Antibiotics did it. Vaccines did it. Longevity will not be different. Slowing aging will not make humans immortal. It will not erase death. It will not turn life into something artificial. It will simply change how long life remains functional. And that may be the most human outcome imaginable. There's a quiet irony in all of this. Humans once accepted dying at 30. Now aging at 80 feels like a problem worth solving. That alone says everything about the direction this story is heading. So the real question is no longer scientific. It is cultural. Should health be allowed to last longer, even if it arrives unevenly at first? Or should decline remain evenly distributed, simply because it feels fair? That answer does not belong to laboratories. It belongs in public conversation. If this episode triggered agreement, discomfort, excitement, or skepticism, the comments are where that conversation continues. And if exploring futures like this matters, subscribing is how these questions keep unfolding. Because the future rarely arrives loudly. It arrives quietly, then all at once.